Welcome to Desperately Seeking the 80s. I am Meg.
And I am Jessica. And Meg and I have been friends since 1982. We got through middle school and high school together here in New York City, where we still live.
And where we podcast about New York City in the 80s. I do Ripped from the Headlines.
And I do pop culture.
I'm going to tell you about two super cool engagements that we had
Yay.
this week from
Marvelous.
listeners. The first one is from Ben.
Hello, Ben.
Another great episode this week. So glad you're back. Now, we have our friend Ben, who we frequently quote. This is a new Ben.
New Ben. Love you, new Ben.
Listener idea. Instead of apologizing when stories seep into the 90s or have roots in the 70s, just start doing what literature scholars do when referring to the long 18th century, which covers 1688 to 1815, and just start saying the long 1980s as a sort of historicism umbrella term. Wink. Love you both. And again, so glad you're back.
Well, Ben.
You love that, I'm sure.
I deeply do. And thank you for your ingenuity and thoughtfulness and scholarly outlook.
No, that's so up your
It's the long
alley.
80s. The 80s were very long.
No, but also
No,
just like the historic reference.
I love him.
and the
I want to party with
terminology.
Ben. Yes, I want to. Partying with Ben sounds like it would be sitting in the library silently next to each other doing research.
Going,
But that's, oh my God, did you know this? That's my kind of party.
Here's another
Okay.
fun engagement.
Mm-hmm.
New Yorker at Home is this woman's handle. And she wrote in because she worked in the park in 2000 when they were working on renovating Belvedere Castle. And she had a use map of the Ramble from the 80s.
Oh, that's
in
what you
her
posted.
office, and
That's
that
what you
is what I
posted.
posted. Is that the most beautiful thing?
That map is like, I feel like we need to make that into merch because that thing is amazing.
It's amazing.
I want it on my wall.
We
I'm
can do
deeply into it.
Maybe that will be my Christmas present to you.
Oh, thank you.
Now, Jessica, we have discussed dive bars on this podcast.
I have lived in dive bars.
Oh.
I have done unmentionable things in dive bars.
What's the weirdest thing you ever did in a dive bar?
I don't know
That is ready that we can say on the podcast. I mean, honestly,
Okay, I
had
can
a
actually
moment where
tell you-
I was like, I could answer that question, but I don't want to answer that question publicly.
I will tell a story that doesn't make me look great, but I'm not the one doing the worst thing in the story.
All
so
right,
there
I'll
you
take
go.
it.
There was a time when I was at either the heights or the depths of my East Village stint as an ersatz rock and roller. And there were a lot of drugs involved. I'm not going to lie, as we all know. And I found myself, a lot of the people who were in my circle, not only in my band, but the bands that we ran around with, were gay. So I found myself many nights at the Cock. I don't think it still exists, or at least not where it was, but it was a really divey, very gay bar. It was a bit rough. You know, there were a lot of fringe people there. And I found myself one very late night in a bathroom stall at the Cock, and there were far too many people in this bathroom stall, and everyone was looking for the drugs. Who had the drugs? And this one guy eventually pulls something out of his pocket, and someone is trying to line up a rail on like the toilet paper dispenser. What I didn't realize, I was facing the paper dispenser, and the wall of the stall right behind me, I wasn't paying attention to. And then I looked around and realized I was in a stall that had a glory hole. And poking through that glory hole was someone's hope.
What did you do?
I did the ultimate in like, hey guys, look at that. And they were like, one of them pounded on the wall and was like, "Put it back in. Nothing happening here." And I was like, "Okay, well, this is the end of the road for me." I thought it was illicit, and then it got worse. Bye-bye. It's 4 a.m. I think I'm done. Nighty night nights off to Williamsburg, where it's normal. It wasn't normal in Williamsburg at all at the time. So does that answer your question?
That was great.
In
Thank
lurid
you.
detail.
Yes,
Have I told
beautiful.
that story here before?
No, I don't think
well,
so.
That's one of many. Tune in.
My sources are New York Times, New York Post, and Politico. Late at night on April 14th, 1983, Marilyn Matlick, a reporter for the New York Post, made her way to Herbie's Bar in Jamaica, Queens. When she got there, it was all locked up and dark, which wasn't surprising considering what had happened there the night before. She and her editors were still piecing together the story. It was pretty gruesome, even by New York City standards. Marilyn pulled herself up to see inside the window of the empty bar, and what she saw made her whole trip worthwhile. A sign above the bar that said, "Topless Dancing." What happened at Herbie's Bar? Brace yourself. 23-year-old Charles Dingle, who had just been released from prison after serving 3 years for robbery, sidled up to the bar at 8 p.m. on Wednesday. There were 4 women also at the bar, plus Herbie Cumming, the owner.
Wait, are you kidding me? There's Mr. Dingle and Mr. Cumming. Like, come on.
It's true, but also this is a very
I know it
dark
takes a dark turn. I'm just trying to enjoy the levity while we have it.
While we've got it, because, it's not going to last
It's going to be
long.
very ugly. I know.
Charles Dingle became belligerent and unpleasant, and Herbie asked him to leave. Instead, Charles shot Herbie in the head.
Oh, my God.
Then he tied up the women and rifled through their purses and discovered that one of them was a part-time mortician. He demanded she remove the bullet from Herbie's head. And she really tried, but it was lodged too far in. So Charles insisted she remove Herbie's entire head with a steak knife, which she did. I mean, what's she going to do? She's a hostage. Meanwhile, Charles Dingle was drinking and snorting cocaine, and at one point in the middle of the night, he raped one of the hostages. And then at 6 a.m., he decided to make a break for it. But his car wouldn't start, so he called a gypsy cab. And when the driver showed up, Dingle locked the driver in a bathroom, grabbed a cardboard box with the head and 2 of his hostages. He let the other 2 go free and drove to Broadway and 168th Street in Manhattan, where he fell asleep at the wheel during a red light. The 2 women jumped out of the car and ran into the subway, where they told a transit cop what had happened. Sleepy Charles Dingle was... Sorry.
That was hilarious.
Okay, Sleepy Charles Dingle was arrested with Herbie Cumming's head in a box on the seat next to him. That night, when Vinnie Macedo...
Was that like the worst unboxing video of all time? Sorry. That was...
Okay, that's the worst of it. We're past the worst of it.
Okay.
That night, when Vinnie Macedo at the New York Post read the police teletype, he knew what he wanted the headline for the story to be.
The headline?
But Dick Belsky, his editor, insisted on some fact-checking. This is why reporter Marilyn Matlick found herself peeking into a darkened bar in the dead of night. According to Charlie Carrillo, who was also in the newsroom that night, Belsky yelled out, "Hang on, Vinnie. We're not 100% sure it's a topless bar." Vinnie jumped on top of his desk and waved his arms. "It's gotta be a topless bar," he cried. "This is the greatest fucking headline of my career."
Oh, this is the headline.
Yes.
Oh my God. This is the best. This brings me so much joy. I love this. Oh my God.
Vinny got his wish. The Topless Bar angle checked out, and within minutes, the presses were rolling. And the most famous tabloid headline of all time, Headless Body and Topless Bar, was immortalized.
Brava. 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 So good. I can't with you right now. I'm just going to keep clapping. Nice.
Okay, this is according to Charlie Carrillo. Quote, the whole staff gathered behind Vinny like one of those oil paintings you see of the signing of the Declaration of Independence, with the founding fathers huddled together to absorb the impact of the moment. Now, the Post got some flack for the lurid headline. Lots of people were like, that's not okay. Post
Don't
editor,
you long for a time when good taste was actually an issue?
like, I don't know about
I don't. That doesn't seem quite cricket. I don't know.
But Post editor Steve Dunleavy responded with, what should we have said? Decapitated cerebellum in tavern of ill repute?
I'm dead.
Literary scholar Peter Shaw wrote in the National Review about its trochaic rhythm, the juxtaposition of the two apparently unrelated kinds of toplessness, conjoined sex and death, even as they are conjoined in reality.
Oh, shut up.
Well, at least he appreciated it.
Well, true, but that's a way to flog that into nothing.
Yeah. The New York Times decided to go with owner of a bar shot to death. Suspect is held.
All right. Fail. Epic fail.
Charles Dingle was eventually convicted of murder, kidnapping, rape, and robbery, and was sentenced to 25 years to life. During his incarceration, he repeatedly assaulted prison staff and was caught with homemade shanks. In 2010, he told the Post that he was unfairly condemned because of the famous headline, and that the witnesses, the women at the bar, which now I think we can probably assume were also dancers. Possibly.
Maybe. Well, but
they shouldn't be trusted.
But one of them worked. Well, she could have had two
jobs. She
was
a part-time
mortician. There you go.
When I first started reading the story, I must admit, I was like, why are there only women in the bar? And that would sort of explain
I think that actually really
why
does.
There were only women in the bar.
That ties it together.
Right? Was it a group? Was it like a book club that went out to a dive bar for a drink?
Everyone, grab Persuasion and meet me at Herbie's.
Or did they actually work there?
I think, well, maybe they did both. Maybe they were the Jane Austen Appreciation Club of Herbie's of Queens.
Also, the reason why I was thinking maybe they were dancers was because Charles Dingle said they shouldn't be trusted because they're not trustworthy people. I'm like, why would he say that about people?
Well, he's also a crazy person who wanted to have a head sawed off.
But what I'm assuming is that he was using the fact that they were sex workers to malign their character.
Indeed. Which is, of course, hilarious. And yet, doesn't it just say everything about how women are viewed in this world that Charles Dingle is like, they did bad things. Okay, Charles.
Okay, Charles Dingle.
And your box of head. Ooh.
We started with a glory hole story.
Look, you've got Cumming, you've got Dingle, you've got Matlick, you've got a box of head. Meg, there are too many jokes that you're setting me up with that I've been holding on to my chair for dear life.
This is a quote from Charles Dingle. Everything is not as it appears. The parole board expects you to come in and plead guilty and take responsibility for the crime. I can't do it because I didn't do it. But don't think I don't have hope. The board might let me go one day, but until then, I'm going to fight. He died in prison in 2012.
He did not live to fight another day.
Some other famous tabloid headlines in New York City in the 80s. I am Death Wish Vigilante. You know who that is.
Curtis?
Bernie Getz.
Oh, Bernie Getz. I thought it was Curtis Sliwa. Sorry, I got excited. All right.
Kvetcher. That's when Koch was reelected in 1985.
Kvetcher. All right. I don't know. That's not a great one.
No. And then, of course, Marla, Best Sex I Ever Had, was the Post in 1990, which now we know was planted by Mr. Trump himself. But while I was doing the research for this, and that's why it's also good that I shared Ben's preamble that we shouldn't apologize for slipping into other decades, because while I was doing the research for this article, I came across such a treasure trove of tabloid headlines all about Anthony Weiner's sex scandal.
Oh, they are.
May I
chef's
share
kiss.
them, please?
I am here for it.
These are my favorite.
Are they all the Post?
No, they are not all the Post. A lot of them are the Post, though. Weiner exposed. Admits it could be my wiener in Twitter pic. Weiner roast. Grilled over imposter's lewd photo. Weiner's second coming. Erect me, Mr. Mayor. Weiner's rise and fall. Sexting member quits Senate.
I am dead. Oh,
Huma pregnant. Pop goes the weasel.
shit.
Weiner, I'll stick it out. Tell Post I won't step down. And then stick a fork in Weiner.
Oh, Anthony.
I mean, people all know what the Anthony Weiner sex scandal is, right? I mean, do we have to get into it?
I think that is such
Google
an easy
it.
Google. Yeah. What I love about the Post is, I mean, it is a terrible newspaper on many levels, but they knew when they had a tiger by the tail, and the headlines, anyone would buy the paper for the headlines, and they were just, it was some of the best marketing. They must have had people who were just writing the headlines. Was it the journalists themselves?
The journalists
did it?
themselves got really excited about headline writing, but it had to be approved. But yeah, no. It was.
They finally got to have some fun.
And honestly, when you think about it, there's so many horrible things that are going on. If there's something on the front of a tabloid, it's probably not really rosy good news. Chances are, right? And so if you can put a funny little spin on it to give someone a chuckle on their way to the subway one morning, I'm all for it.
Absolutely.
In that,
I'm
we
with
should
you.
give Anthony Weiner a key to the city.
Just for having done what he did. Thank you for the memories, Mr. Weiner. Hello, Meg.
Hello.
So my engagement question for you, when you think of Cher, what do you think of?
I think of her show and all of her outfits, her solo show. I mean, I did watch the Sonny and Cher show, but then she had her solo show, and part of her solo show was just showing off all of those incredible
Her
outfits.
Bob Mackie outfits.
Her Bob Mackie.
Well, when I think of Cher, I also think of, her, like that, what she wore to the Oscars with that. But I have to admit that the visual of Sonny and Cher was so funny.
Oh, I love
that. It's indelibly in my brain. And even as a child, I remember thinking, what's she doing with that guy? Like, what the hell? Like this homunculus with a mustache. What's happened? I didn't think homunculus at 7, but if I knew the word, I would have used it. But did you know that Sonny Bono also had an acting career?
No, I didn't. I mean, I know that he kind of discovered her and was instrumental in making her a star, but I did not know that he acted.
Well, acting might be a strong word, but in 1980, Sonny Bono, with Wayne Rogers of MASH fame, and Adrienne Barbeau, who was in horror movies like The Thing, I believe.
She also did a guest stint on Dexter.
She did?
Mm-hmm.
Scream Queens. Interesting. Well, the three of them were in a film in 1980 called Top of the Hill.
Mm-hmm.
And it was about the Olympics at Lake Placid.
Okay. And this is obviously after the Sonny and Cher show.
Oh, yes.
They've divorced.
1980.
Got it. Okay.
Yes. But I ran across this nugget and I was like, what the fuck is that?
Skiing?
Yeah.
Oh my God, isn't that awful and ironic because that's how he died?
Oh my God, yes, it is. That's
you
horrible.
hadn't thought about that?
No, because I was too stuck on like, was he also in Caveman or was that Ringo Starr? I have to look that up. It was Ringo Starr. But yes, that is a horrible foreshadowing. But there he was. And I was like, what is this ridiculousness? And I was shocked to see the screenplay was written by the luminary Irwin Shaw. Irwin Shaw is a name you may not recognize, but his work you absolutely will. In 1913, our boy Irwin Shaw, who started life as Irwin Gilbert Shamferoff, was born in the South Bronx.
Oh.
1913. And in 1914, moved to Brooklyn.
Okay.
He came from very humble beginnings in a very working class Jewish household. And he found his way to Brooklyn College. Boy made good. He got kicked out.
Oh.
And he failed too many classes. He failed Latin. I think he failed math. Really fucked up. But then he wound up getting reaccepted. And he had a stint in the army. He did all the stuff, but he got reaccepted to Brooklyn College. And he wound up being a screenwriter and a playwright who worked with, throughout the 1930s, the latter half of the 30s, like he started off strong with Elia Kazan, John Garfield, Clifford Odets, and talking about long tail 80s. For those of you who love the movie Barton Fink, that character modeled by the Coen brothers on Clifford Odets. There you go.
Interesting.
And Lee J. Cobb of 12 Angry Men, for those of you who may not remember who he was. His first novel, The Young Lions, was a smash, and it was made into a film with Marlon Brando. And his career continued on like that until he became incensed during the 50s with McCarthyism.
Yeah.
And he spoke out on behalf of Dalton Trumbo and others who had been very publicly ruined by being blacklisted. So he got blacklisted and he wound up moving to Paris and Switzerland and really spent the rest of his life there, but wrote like a fiend. The man never stopped writing. Some other very famous things that you might remember is, and this is in the 70s, it was made into a miniseries. Remember Rich Man, Poor Man?
Yeah, sure. He wrote the screenplay for that?
He wrote the book and then the screenplay. Oh. And he also wrote the screenplay for Desire Under the Elms. Yeah. So that's what he did. So that's who he was. So then I did another little search on Irwin Shaw because I was like, this is an interesting guy. And he seems like a bit of a crank that he was like, you know what? Fuck McCarthyism. I'm out of here. And never came back. So I was looking up what more he did in the 80s other than die from prostate cancer in Switzerland. But what else did he do? Because if he's doing the Sonny Bono movie, like what is going on with this guy? What is happening? And I was rewarded for my pains. Now, quick digression. Many of our friends have kids entering college this year or who have already entered, like your sweet child, or about to. So college is in the air for us right now, which is why a clip from October 31st, 1980 from the New York Times caught my eye. It's in the B section, Notes on People. And it's about Irwin Shaw going back to Brooklyn College for a visit.
Okay, so this is after he's made good.
Oh, yes. And he was reaccepted in the 30s. But I was thinking so much about like, with kids going off to college, we're telling these are going to be the best years of your life. And I, was I was prompted to recall my time at Kenyon, loving it. But, there were also dark times at school.
It's hard.
Enter Irwin Shaw.
Okay. I'm so glad you know the answer because I was going to ask, but I didn't want to ask if you didn't know the answer. Like, why? What happened?
Well,
why did he fail Latin? Why did he take Latin in the first place?
He was expelled from the college after his first year because he flunked 2 courses. But when he came back in 1934, he was the editor of the school paper. But he was so bitter about Brooklyn College that as the editor of the student paper, The Pioneer, here was his parting shot. And this is why I love this man more than anything.
And what year is this?
1934. The New York Times says he had become so bitter that he wrote a farewell editorial sharply critical of the faculty. Quote, "God, gentlemen, how you have bored me." And I was like, I'm sold. That's
He's
it.
the editor, so he can print it.
Yeah, and I was remembering us doing the yearbook and how there were moments where we're just going to put it in.
We got caught, though.
We did.
Got caught. They didn't let us
There were
put it
a
in.
few moments. The university reacted by threatening to withhold his degree, but he graduated anyway.
Wow.
So then he begins his life as a writer and, is almost instantly successful and critically acclaimed. Not surprising from a man who decided to say, "God, gentlemen, how you have bored me," which, by the way, is how I'm going to leave every party now. 2 years ago, so this is 1978, Mr. Shaw returned to the college for the first time since his graduation. Quote, "I have a lot to be thankful for to Brooklyn College," he said then. "It threw me out in my freshman year because I flunked calculus and Latin. I understand flunking calculus. This was in the middle of the Depression, and I had to go to work. Work was so distasteful to me that I resolved to be a writer."
Oh, that's so interesting.
So in 1980...
So he's like, study or work? Okay, I'll do better at calculus.
Well,
I have to.
The college said yesterday that the 67-year-old writer had agreed to fly over from his winter home in Switzerland to attend a banquet on November 22nd when he will be awarded 1980 Alumnus of the Year. My next project is to find what his words were at this dinner. I'm sure they were choice. But Irwin Shaw is now going to be like my spirit animal, as we used to say. His crankiness, I'm bringing it on. And I think, you and I have been talking about merch. I think that finding quotes from people like this to put it on t-shirts and mugs is right there.
That's so fun.
So
I love
God,
that.
gentlemen, how you have bored me. Irwin Shaw, amazing, acclaimed, prolific New York writer, filled with bitterness and bile. Bless him.
I feel like we've had a few tie-ins. We had like a tie-in within the first story, what with the glory hole and the wiener, which was very satisfying.
Yes, that, so to speak.
And we didn't know that was going to happen. It was just happenstance. And then the fact that it's all about the headline. Like
yes.
In both cases, they were about headlines. What are the odds there?
I think that the point of it is that once you have access to the ability to write the headline,
the story writes itself?
The story writes itself, or also like, what a great moment to sound off in whatever way you want it. Because what I think about the New York Post people, those writers, is, as you said, they're hemmed in by these really grim stories. Writers by nature want to show off. They all want to show off who's the smartest person in the room and who can have the best turn of phrase. So for all of the journos in New York City, I can only imagine that they were the most envied because they were given free rein to be just maniacs.
As opposed to the poor guys over at the New York Times who are like
Gaddafi strikes again.
Right.
Bad news. Yes.
All the news is fit to print.
So yeah, these guys, and I can only imagine the guys at the Post were like, why aren't we as good as them? We need to get better. The only things that were as good as the New York Post were the Weekly World News. Did you ever read that?
No.
Or are you aware of it?
I'm aware of it. That's about as tabloidy as it comes.
It's not even a tabloid. It's a made up newspaper.
Right.
Like, do you remember?
The aliens.
Yeah, exactly.
Which are real.
Bat Boy. Do you remember Bat Boy? If you don't know we should put Bat Boy in the Instagram.
Yeah. Where do we know where
It was Weekly World News.
But what year?
Oh, I think it was the aughts.
Okay, I will look that up.
But that was really the goal. And do you remember in Men in Black how Tommy Lee Jones's character was like, I only read the tabloids. That's what tells the real truth. And one of the newspapers that he pulled up was the Weekly World News. And I think it had Bat Boy on the cover. But that's, like chef's kiss. So good. But you know what I was thinking is that we've talked about writers a lot on this podcast. And the writers who we've talked about, quite rightly, have been the people who broke in the 80s. But one of the things, and back to Ben and his long tail 80s, is the people who were writing and still being wildly successful in the 80s were born in the teens. And the sensibility of the 80s was still imbued with that Depression era ethos, outlook. There was much more, and we haven't really talked about it, but Irwin Shaw is kind of an opening that
he was born in 1913 or something.
Yeah.
It's crazy to think that he was having influence in the 80s. I mean, these decades really condense into, the whole century, really. By the time, we get to 1980, we've got Sonny Bono in a movie
that foreshadows
Irwin Shaw.
Yeah, that and the thing that I find really interesting about so many of the stories that we have done is that it shows that crossover, that there's the shadow of old New York, and we've talked about political stories where there's echoes of Tammany Hall, but like there is even like talking about Luchow's and how that was Diamond Jim Brady and Lillian Russell, like all of these places at the time still existed. And the people who saw it then were still writing and still contributing at that time. And if you had a long career, that was great. You weren't considered passé. And of course, now, if you haven't, back to unboxing videos, if you haven't unboxed the right Chanel bag on Instagram or whatever, TikTok, in the last 30 seconds, you're irrelevant. And these people had platforms, so to speak, forever. I just think that's really amazing. And I think that it also sort of created a continuity with people's understanding of history, that because they were just writing about things they knew. So someone in the 80s is going to read about something that happened in the 20s as a firsthand report, or at least with a perspective that brings it to life and makes it real. Like I was thinking about one of my favorite books in the 80s was E.L. Doctorow's Ragtime, which is sitting on the shelf right in back of you. And there were so many things in that book that were about, obviously the turn of the century. And E.L. Doctorow was not alive at the turn of the century, but caring about history and interviewing people and bringing that forward was considered normal in fiction. Like
and wasn't the movie in 1981?
I think a little bit later, but
okay.
I'm not entirely sure. We should look it up. And E.L. Doctorow, by the way, Kenyan graduate.
Ooh.
But yeah, I think that's what really drew me to Irwin Shaw, is that these people, and obviously mostly men, unfortunately, but these guys had a tenure that transcended their own, what we would now consider their era.
Right.
His era was really like the 60s, but it wasn't.
Right.
50s and 60s.
If you want to extend it a little bit.
40s, 50s. 60s.
Certainly the 80s is hitting us hard now. And whatever was booming in the 80s is now coming back to the influential. Must I say the horrible?
Yes, please say the horrible thing. He whose name shall not be spoken.
Yeah.
Vold Trumpelmort.
Right.
Isn't it a better way to say his name? It makes it sound cute.
Did you hear what he said about women this week?
Oh, I'm sure it was really enlightened. What did he say?
He's going to be our protector.
From himself? Like, from what? That's gruesome.
I mean, I'll probably cut this because by the
Why?
time we air it, I mean, he's going to say something else horrible.
Well, no, I think that it doesn't matter. We don't have to be like, what's the most recent thing he said? Because you'll never catch up. That's like,
Okay, how about
I'm going to
this?
start reading the newspaper from 1972 because I have to read it from there to now understand what's happening today.
Well, and one of his acolytes said, I don't understand why these suburban women care so much about abortion. So many of them are over 50 years old. Why is it even an issue for them? That was said this week out loud to a group of people.
And no one egged him. No one threw a rotten banana peel.
Well,
was it J.D. Vance?
It wasn't. It might as well have. No, it wasn't J.D. Vance.
You know, I was speaking of Vance. I was thinking this morning, this tells you a lot about how dark my thoughts are these days. I was lying in bed thinking about Pence.
Lying in bed thinking about Pence. I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Don't do that.
Well,
Don't you have like
other things to think about?
Melatonin or something?
No, that was this morning. He was my waking thought. No. It's worse. And I was remembering the memes that had a fly on his head. Do you remember those? Those were hilarious.
Was in the debate, right?
I think so.
Yeah.
Yes. The fly kept following him and landed on his hair. And then there were all these memes of like the fly talking and being like, smells like shit. Oh, wait, it's Pence. But I was thinking about him and I was like, oh God, you know, he has stayed very quiet on Trump. And I so badly wanted to find a way. Of course, this will never happen.
Call him up and go, hey.
Or no, to talk to Vance and be like, hey, Vance, this is what happened to Pence. How are you feeling about your chances of surviving Trump's next call to, you know,
action,
hang you, you know, whatever that might be. And then it got me thinking about like everybody thinks that something bad is going to happen to someone else, that they are exempt. It's not going to happen to them. And I know that's not really funny and it's not going anywhere in particular, but just rather than think about Trumplemort, which is so disturbing and vomitous that I can't. So my subconscious is now working around him and like, who are the people who have really been harmed? What would this guy say to this guy? So wouldn't that be amazing? Like, I want some kind of like, I don't know, if only Barbara Walters was still at it, that could you imagine her with Pence on one side and JD Vance on the other and being like, so I can't do her lisp. I wish I could. We need to get
Bubba
Nick
Wawa.
here. Bubba Wawa. I literally, that is how I started my day today, thinking about that.
Well, I am excited for the Vance Walls debate, which is next Tuesday, I believe. Oh, it's going to be today when this podcast drops. Very exciting.
Very exciting.
Watch the debate.
Well, you know
kids.
that Walls is going to actually. I had a moment in a cab yesterday. So I was hailing a cab, and it didn't see me, and I did a gesture. I did not give it the finger. There was a gesture that I made, and then he stopped. And when I got in the cab, I was like, that was one of the most New York gestures, and I'm going to do it for you right now, and then you're going to help me describe it. So the cab goes by, and I go. Right?
Yeah.
So it's you look completely like pissed
hey,
and befuddled,
guy,
and your hands
that's
your
what
palms
the gesture
out.
Is called. What the
Yes, hands out, palms up. But it's not just that they're up; it's the flick. It's like your palms are down, and then you flick it up. Like what the fuck? But there's no actual, popping the bird.
Did you talk to him after you got in?
No, he was very sweet. He just hadn't seen me, and I was having a fit of. But
why does that make you think of Walls and Vance?
Because I think that Walls is going to do that the entire debate. Because his whole thing is they're just weird, and so if that's his selling point, right? Like he's going to just be like, I just need to really make it clear to the American people. This guy's nuts. he's a little fucking nuts. Take a look at this guy. And I know that he's going to be really well prepared to bait him and then be like, asshole says what? Like, there's going to be a lot of that. But anyway, any old who that and which brings us sort of full circle to my love of Irwin Shaw and crusty older guys. Although frighteningly, Waltz isn't that much older than us, is he? How
Don't
old is
tell
he?
people that. It's styling. It's
It's all styling. It's too much fleece.